Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plutnik, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the author of the Cutting Through newsletter on Substack. It felt important to get back to recording another video, given the news that has just broken just a few minutes ago that the United States has attacked 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, or at least that is what Donald Trump announced. And so there isn't a lot of information for me to discuss right now, but I would like to offer some initial thoughts on where this could go, where we should be worried that it'll go, what considerations we might have. So let's start with the apparent facts of the case, which include attacks on Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo. Fordo is the key enrichment site that is buried very deep underground and could only really be hit by American massive ordnance bombs called bunker busters that can only be delivered by B-2 bombers, which just coincidentally yesterday were starting to move towards the Middle East. They had headed from the U.S. mainland to Guam. We don't know where they went after that. But if the United States was going to hit Fordo, I think it's safe to say they were using the bunker buster bombs because anything else doesn't really make any sense. It's not anything that Israel itself can't do. The implications here are staggering, quite frankly. One point that I've just made on social media that I think Americans really need to think about, and I'm talking to all Americans, I'm talking whether you're pro-war, anti-war, just think about this fact. The United States has gotten itself involved now in a war. And people may think about Americans stationed in the Middle East, American military personnel stationed in the Middle East, as being protected in the same sense that Israeli civilians are protected. Israel, as we know, has a large arsenal that the United States consistently replenishes of interceptor missiles and systems, Iron Dome, David Sling. We have given them the THAAD interception system. Israel stations these interceptors in key areas throughout the country, following where their own military installations are, which are also in large population centers. In other words, Israel uses their own populations as human shields the same way they have accused Hamas of doing. That aside, the American military bases in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Bahrain, all of these places, they don't have those. They don't have that kind of protection. It's not to say they're defenseless. It's these are American bases, and they have American equipment, but they are not protected by these kind of interceptors the way Israeli sites are. So if Iran decides to respond by attacking U.S. bases, those bases are much more vulnerable. And if Iran decides to pursue the same sort of practice that they've done with Israel, which is to launch multiple missiles and drones all at the same time to overwhelm anti-aircraft defenses, they're going to find much more success against American military bases than they have against Israel. So I don't even know if Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth or any of those people have even given any thought to that point. But it is a fact, and so it is something that if Americans are only concerned, as many of the anti-war figures on the right are primarily concerned about American lives, that is something they should really take very heavily into account. Those of us who are actually worried about all lives and think that all the lives of people in the Middle East matter, we need to look at a potential major spike in the long term. There may be a huge Iranian response to this. I think probably, I'm sure right now Iran's leadership is deciding tactically what's the best way to respond in the short term. And I think a lot of that will have to do with how much damage the American strikes have done, which we don't know yet. Um, but in the long term, this is going to ignite much more sort of low to mid level conflict throughout the region. In other words, it's going to escalate those that have been kind of on simmer for a while. Um, Especially in recent months. So we can expect that there will be more conflict throughout the region, more instability, more violence. Um, I don't think that that is something about which the United States is losing sleep. But I think those of us who care about humanity should be losing a lot of sleep over that. On the political side, um, I think we really need to look at the fact, and I'm sure it's a fact, that the Trump administration has given very, very little thought to the ramifications of these actions. What do they mean? Look, Israel is not in this to simply to destroy Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran can rebuild them. They have the technology, they have the know-how. Um, it may take a long time, but they can rebuild this stuff. You cannot bomb away these abilities. You know, the way you stop them is the way they've been stopped in other countries, which is by agreement and by enforceable agreement, which is something we had, and Donald Trump threw away, and which the Israelis um, uh, urged him quite strongly to throw away. Although I still contend that's not the ultimate reason that he did it. I believe that ultimately he tore up the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, because it was the signature accomplishment of Barack Obama. But be that as it may, it was torn up and it was working. So if that was really the goal, Israel would not have wanted to see that agreement torn up. They would have wanted to see it enforced and enforced strictly. But that is not the goal. The goal here is regime change. And the question is, how strongly on board with that goal is the Trump administration? Um, I tweeted a a picture of, I guess, an interview show on Fox News that I think says a lot about at least what the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party, which is still very much driving things, and especially in foreign policy. Um, and it's the same people who got us into Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, I think it gives us insight into what they're thinking, and it's, you know, the same failed plan as before. This ad for Fox News was about an interview that they were going to do with Reza Pahlavi, who's the grandson of the late Shah of Iran, who we basically installed against the will of the Iranian people, whose regime we maintained for over a quarter century until it fell, and which caused the massive resentment against the United States that we have seen in Iran ever since, and the mistrust of the American government. And I hasten to add, not the American people. And there really is a strong sense of distinction there among, at least among Iranians that I'm familiar with and that I've spoken to, and from reports that I've seen. If they think Pahlavi can come in and just take over, well, this is the same thing they tried with Ahmed Chalabi back, 20 plus years ago when they took out Saddam Hussein and tried to install Chalabi, who had no following and had no trust and was largely a hated figure and seen widely and correctly as an American stooge. Iraqis did not accept him. The Iranian people will not accept Pahlavi or anyone else the United States installs. I think that's probably where the thinking of the neocons is going, and it is a very dangerous place, as we saw 20 years ago in Iraq. There are differences, without a doubt, between then and now. No question about it. So I don't want to go too far with the analogy, but that's a similarity, and the similarity and the thread that connects them is still that the same neocons and their fellow travelers, who maybe were more junior grade 20 years ago and are now more leading figures, those same neocons who brought us to disaster in Iraq and Afghanistan are going to bring us to an even bigger disaster in Iran that is going to lead to who knows what kind of fallout. I mean, we saw radicalization across the region and the creation of groups that were far worse than what had come before them, such as the Islamic State, far more dangerous, far more ruthless. That's what we're playing with doing again here. Look, I'm not going to repeat all the stuff I said in my last video and in my recent articles. You can go to Substack, mitchellputnick.substack.com, and you can see that all for yourself in the argument about why Iran was not, in fact, trying to get a nuclear weapon. But I think we should look at the fact um, that the U.S. intelligence sector agrees with my statement on that, and has said since 2007 that Iraq has not been, since at least 2003, pursuing a nuclear weapon. So for more than 20 years, the U.S. intelligence services is telling us they know that Iran has not been pursuing a nuclear weapon. They reaffirmed that just a couple of months ago when Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testified to that in front of Congress. And when Donald Trump was presented with that fact, he just said, well, she's wrong. I mean, she wasn't just giving her opinion. She wasn't just shooting the breeze and saying what too much. She was giving the assessment of numerous American intelligence agencies. That's what the DNI does. The DNI was created to coordinate the intelligence services in the wake of 9/11 because they were not coordinated and were not speaking to each other. That's the point of the DNI. So Tulsi Gabbard is getting this information from all across the American intelligence community, and there's no part of the American intelligence community that has come out and contradicted this. And Trump just says, no, she's wrong. How does he know? Well, it's his gut. It's not his gut. It's not. It's that he has already gone to such lengths to talk about Iran nuclear weapon. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Iran is chasing a nuclear weapon. That to now acknowledge that our own intelligence has confirmed, and we know for a fact Iran has not been trying to acquire a nuclear weapon. Even he doesn't want to be seen to be backtracking that much. Even he, who lies as a matter of course, even more so than most politicians, doesn't want to be seen dissembling quite that blatantly. So he doesn't do it. We are in a very, very scary place right now. Israel and the United States have destroyed any semblance of an international system and of international law. It's gone. I mean, the structures are still there. The court, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, the United Nations, all these things are still there. They're toothless and they're meaningless now. They do nothing but make statements. They cannot rein in lawlessness unless the United States decides to be the enforcer. So that's not law, and in fact, that's reflected, I think, not only in Benjamin Netanyahu's action, but also in the whole way Donald Trump has approached this. So he made the announcement that he bombed these 3 sites, and then he said, now is the time for peace. In other words, saying, now that we've bombed, don't retaliate against us and come to the table and agree to our terms. Okay, I mean, it's a tactic, and it's a tactic that would be very, very familiar to any gangster, any mob boss, that you want to look at. Any of the most criminal people, whether it's street crime or governmental crime. This is what they do. He's not negotiating. Don't let anyone say he's negotiating. It's the art of the deal. He's playing 4D. That's a lot of crap. What he's doing is very simple. He is holding a gun to Iran's head, saying, I can shoot you at any time, so you agree to my terms. Iran is saying no. And so Trump is shooting his gun, as it were, and dropping his bombs and unleashing Israel. It's just pure criminal behavior. So, as I said, there isn't a lot that we know right now. There is, however, one thing that I must, and I've written about this already, but I think it is so important, even though it will almost certainly, even in the best case scenario, not become a law. There are bills, joint resolution in both the House and the Senate, to invoke the War Powers Act and remind the president that Congress, not the president, is empowered by the Constitution to declare war. Congress actually does have the power to simply cut off the funding for these these operations. Because the president doesn't really have the right to do that. Now, I don't want people to misunderstand. This is an argument and a push and pull that's been going on for decades, and Congress has been gradually abrogating its or abandoning its responsibilities. And presidents have, as presidents do, and this is both parties, gone ahead and tried to get more and more of that power into the role of commander in chief, rather than having to go to Congress before they can act in control of the military. So it's not new, but it's never been more crucial. In the House, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, Republican, not a great by any means, but it does matter that he's made this a bipartisan bill. Have submitted a war powers resolution to forbid Trump to act against Iran without congressional authorization. It's the War Powers Act, and by Khanna and Massie and with others supporting, its number is HCon Res 38. So House Concurrent Resolution 38. And in the Senate, Tim Kaine has submitted a concurrent bill, SJ Res 59. So Senate Joint Resolution 59. Both of them are just called War Powers Act bills. Call your representatives, call your senators, tell them to support these things. They need to hear that this is what the people want. It's not going to change anything now, because in order to really enact this, not only would the laws have to pass, which is very unlikely, but on top of that, they would have to be able to secure a veto-proof majority in the Senate, because Trump would certainly veto it, and that requires 2/3 of the Senate. That's certainly not going to happen. So it's not like these can become laws, but the politics of this matter. The members of Congress hearing this matter, and it will matter to you as a voter at the next election, at the midterms, and at the next presidential elections. Remember who supported these bills and who didn't. Remember who was responsive to you as a constituent and who wasn't. Because that's how these things are going to change. It may not change anything now, but it may help us avert the next catastrophe. And this will be, my friends, a catastrophe. So again, as always, please like, subscribe, share. If you can, support Cutting Through, mitchellplitnick.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber. You can donate any amount you want as a one-time donation through Cash App. And if you can't do any of that, please do share this blog, this particular video, and hopefully we'll all be able to still talk soon.